Good evening. On behalf of the Student Academy of Doctors of Audiology, I would like to welcome you to today's Student Practice Management webinar, Physician Outreach and Marketing. My name is Andrew Abernathy, and I am pleased to serve as today's course coordinator. I have just a few housekeeping reminders before we begin. If you have any technical challenges during the session, please use the chat feature to make me aware, and I will be glad to assist you. Please type your questions into the question queue, and they will be addressed by presenters at the end of the presentation. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available for online viewing next week. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce the course moderator for this session, Kate Witham, SATA Board President and third-year audiology student at Gallaudet University.
Thank you, Andrew. On behalf of the SATA Board, I'm excited for the opportunity to welcome AUD students from programs across the country to this session on marketing and physician outreach. It is also my distinct pleasure to introduce today's course leader, Dr. Tom Tedeschi. Dr. Tedeschi, AUD, is the Chief of Audiology and Regulatory Affairs for Amplifon Americas. Primary responsibilities Center and Government Affairs and Regulatory Activities. He holds a doctorate degree in audiology. Dr. Tedeschi has worked in a number of sectors throughout his career: hospital-based, private practice, teaching, and industry-related positions. He started his career as the Chief of Audiology for a large children's hospital medical center, where he specialized in central auditory disorders and neurophysical evaluations of the hearing and balance mechanisms. He moved into the private sector, where he was partner in a hearing and balance center. At that time, he also had adjunct professor status at the University of Akron. After leaving private practice, Dr. Tedeschi became the Director of Worldwide Training and Business Development for Sonic Innovations and was responsible for the establishment of training protocols and business development in 22 countries. He has co-authored chapters on ethics in audiology in 2 books and recently co-authored a chapter on practice management. He has been the author of numerous professional articles and has given over 400 professional presentations, both nationally and internationally. Dr. Tedeschi has served on various committees for the Academy of Doctors of Audiology and the American Academy of Audiology, including the Academy's Ethical Practice Board, and is a past president of the Ohio Academy of Audiology, a recipient of Distinguished Fellow for Policy and Strategy, National Academy of Practice. Dr. Tedeschi joined the Amplifon Group in 2009 as VP of SONUS, then moved to VP of Training and Development, and currently Chief of Audiology and Regulatory Affairs. At this time, will turn it over to Dr. Tedeschi.
Thanks, Kate. Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this interesting time as we all meet in our homes and are going through this presentation. So we're going to talk about physician marketing tonight. And physician marketing is a very interesting topic because it will not only encompass a great deal of time and effort in private practice, but also if you're in a hospital practice and you're working in a hospital, you'll see that physician marketing plays a very important part. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see a picture of me, so you can see what I look like there. And we'll go to the next slide, and we'll start to talk about physician marketing. What is it? And basically, if you want to think about physician marketing, it's value. It's you want to show, how you can be of value to your patients, but also how you can be of value to physicians' patients. That's what they're looking for. And so how can you build those relationships? How can you capture that value? Because what you want to do is you want to be talking about and showing physicians the value that you bring to them as a colleague. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. So let's go to the next slide. So let's look at some industry data on physician marketing. First of all, it's one of the top 2 referral sources that audiologists today have. So if you start to look at where you're going to have patients come into your office from, physician referral is one of the top two. The other one that's part of the top two is word of mouth, believe it or not. And so those are two of your best sources, but physician marketing becomes extremely important. The second reason why it becomes important is that 35% of your new referrals are from physicians. And those physicians, and we're looking, and this is industry data looking at a number of private practices across the country. And if we look at that, if you look at 35% of your patients, you're also going to see that these patients are patients who show up and that they are motivated. Because once they have that referral from their physician to your office, then you know that they are ready to seek the help that you can provide for them. The last thing is 69% of all the practices surveyed in this survey indicated that physician marketing was effective. And when I mean effective, it means that these people were willing and were anxious to come into your office. And so those are pretty good statistics right there. So let's look at why physician marketing is so important. Next slide. So when you go to a physician's office and you start to talk to physicians, don't think that just because you're a doctor of audiology that they're going to say, oh, great, well, I'm going to start sending all my patients to you. What you're going to find out that it usually takes 4 to 6 conversations with the office, with not only the physician, but with the key management staff of that office to even get one referral. Don't be surprised if the first time you go to an office to visit and you start to work on your physician marketing that you don't even see the physician. You may find that the first person that you ever get to talk to is just a front office person. You have to remember that physicians' offices, when you go into those, are very busy offices generally. And so there's a lot going on. And so don't be offended if you do not get to go into an office or see the physician the first time. The key word here is don't give up. Keep going, keep going. The great thing about it is physician referrals have a high appointment rate. So if a physician tells a patient, you need to go to Dr. So-and-so's office, the audiologist, then 99% of the time they're going to make that appointment and show up. And so let's go to the next slide. The other thing you have to look into as we start to talk about physician referrals is what does it cost to do physician marketing? You know, you may think that, well, it just takes me to going into an office or maybe I'll drop something off. Well, that is time off. One of the things that you've probably learned in some of the practice management classes or webinars that you're learning is how to develop what it costs to run your office per hour. That means, and so on an average office, it takes about $175 to $250 an hour to run that office. When you're out of that office for that hour or 45 minutes or 2 hours, all depending on how many visits you're going to make, remember that is a cost you need to add into your profit and loss. But are you going to do, the question you have to ask, are you going to do the marketing? And are you going to go visit the physicians, or are you going to hire somebody? Are you going to utilize a member of your staff? Are you going to hire maybe an outside company? Because there's outside companies also that specialize in physician marketing for audiologists. So these are things that you have to look at. And as you start to develop, as you start to work within your offices, you know, you have to start to think about, what's it going to cost me? What's it going to cost my office? And I need to prepare for that. The other thing you have to look at when we start to talk about estimate your cost of physician marketing is what's the return on investment? So when we talk about return on investment, if I spend 1 to 2 or 3 hours a month or more in physician marketing, how many referrals will I receive out of that? And for those referrals, what then income do I capture from those patients coming in? So if my 3 hours out of the office or my 5 hours out of the office costs my practice $2,000, well, then what do I get in return? Meaning, how much will I generate from the patients that those physicians refer to me? And what you'll find is generally that you'll have a very high return on that investment. At first, you may not, as you first start getting involved with physician marketing. But as you go along, you'll start to see that investment paying off. The other thing you have to remember is that there are many different types of physician marketing that you can do. And so tonight we're just going to cover a few different areas. But there's also, if you go to the ADA website, you'll find that we have a physician marketing and outreach area on the website that has a great deal of materials that you can look at that we've put together over the last few years that you can utilize in your toolbox as you go out and make these marketing appointments. Let's go to the next slide. So you're going to see the 4 phases of physician marketing. So let's talk about the first phase. So the first phase, as we hit that, is branding. So we have to create your brand. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see what the definition of branding is. And it's basically the art and science of influencing perception about a product, service, or organization. And you have a product, you have a service, and you're an organization. So you're all 3. And probably the most important aspect in physician marketing is branding. And what is your brand? Who are you? What is your product? Your product is you. What is your service? The service are the services that you can provide to that physician and that physician's patients. And you represent your organization, your company, your group that you're with. And so branding becomes one of the most important aspects. If we look at the next slide, we'll see, so what's it mean to create a brand identity? So what does it mean for you to create a brand identity? Well, there's approximately 12,000 audiologists in practice today. So how will you differentiate yourself? What makes you different from maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or more audiologists that may be in your community? Why should that physician refer to you and not to one of them? And what can you do? Satisfaction with their hearing aids is a primary contributing factor. That means as you start to work with people, you want to make sure that physician knows, and when you talk to the physician, what your satisfaction ratings are. They want to see data. They don't want to see, they just want to hear stories, but they want to have data on how you can help their patients, and then what their patients are saying about you, or what other patients are saying about you. And so you want to develop a relationship with that physician, that you are a healthcare professional, that you're not a laboratory service, but that you are a colleague and a professional that can help them, that can advise them, and can assist their patients in living a more normal and happy life. You also want to, as you start to create your brand, you want to learn how to gain the trust and loyalty of these physicians and the people that you're seeing. As I said earlier, that word of mouth is one of the top 2 ways to get referrals. So the more that you help people, the more that they are happy with are satisfied with the services you provide, the more they're going to tell their friends. And that is worth $1 million in advertising revenue. So you want to create that brand. You want to make those physicians understand who you are and that your name is your brand or your company is your brand. Let's go to the next slide. So physician marketing, it involves both branding of yourself, but then the marketing of your office. And so if we go to the next slide. So how do we start branding? Well, it's all about you. your organization. This is the one time where you want to go into a place and you don't have to be humble. You want to talk about yourself. This is all about you. And why should the physician refer to you than another audiologist? What is it that makes you different? What value can you bring? If you're an audiologist who has multi-specialties in your office, if you're doing not only diagnostic testing, but you're doing vestibular testing, you're doing oral rehab, those are things that you want to talk about. You want them to know all the opportunities that he has or she has to refer to you. Also, this is a great time with the COVID virus. This is a great example. If you're doing teleservices, the physicians are still seeing patients. They're still having individuals that are coming in. If you have a internist or a general practitioner that you are has as a physician referring to you, and you have an individual with a sudden hearing loss, where are they going to send that person? If you have teleaudiology, you can tell them, hey, I can help you there. I can work with that. So there's a lot of different things that you want to make sure that you portray to that physician, those physicians that you're working with, that you can work, that you have. Also, what's your value proposition? Meaning, what is it that you have that makes you different? What's your value? And let's go to the next slide. So branding. Let's talk about your company brand. When you read the business news, you often see names, companies such as Nike and Starbucks and Target. These are all brands, and they're companies. 20 years ago, as it shows, we would have called these companies, but now we know the brand. If we see the swoosh, we know that that's the brand for Nike. What is your brand? Do you have a brand? Is it your name? Do you have a company logo? What is it that's going to identify your company over another's? So think about that. These are things that you need to think about as you work with physician marketing. And then your name. What is your name of your company? Is it your name? Do you have a name for is it Audiology Associates? Is it Dr. Thomas Tedeschi? What is the brand that you want them to think about? When the physician has an individual with a hearing or balance issue, and they're thinking about where should I send this person, your name should come to mind. So what is the name that you want them to think about? What is it that they will remember? So think about your name. Let's go to the next slide. Identity. So what is your brand identity? What is it that you do? What is your distinction? Think about every little thing that you do within your office and with you leave to physicians. We talk about, do you have a symbol? Do you have a slogan? These are all little different nuances that will make an impression onto the physicians. Don't think that if you just walk into the office and you meet with a physician and say, hi, I'm here. I just want you to know I have an office within so many miles of your office. I'd love to have referrals from you. That's not how are they going to remember that? What is it that remember? But it's different little things these different little nuances that will identify you as a brand. So if they see this symbol or they see something that will catch their eye, these are all things that will make them remember you. And that's all part of branding. Your image. When you walk into an office, how do you look? What are you wearing? What is the professional feeling that you bring when you go into that office? People remember who you are, what type of air you brought about you. And so these are all parts of branding. Do you wear a suit, or do you wear a lab coat, or do you wear whatever it is that you feel you want that physician's office to remember as you walk into that office? That's part of branding. So what is it? So think about all these little aspects, because you're branding yourself. You're branding yourself. And remember, we talked about this a couple of slides back. You want to make sure you're differentiating yourself from all the other audiologists that may be within your town. Or if you're in a hospital setting, what is it that's going to make those physicians remember your services in your part of the hospital? And so it's all part of branding. Also, the brand, next slide, brand is your reputation. What is your reputation in the community? How many physicians know who you are? And what is that? You know, when I was in private practice, one of the advantages I had was I was also an instructor at a couple of the hospitals for grand rounds. And so we would present once or twice a year at the various medical meetings on a specific topic. And they got to know who we were. And we were able to build a reputation within the community. What is your reputation? What can you do that other physicians will start to talk about your office, will talk about you, and in a favorable light? People try and shape their personal brand. You know, you can shape this today. We have so many different ways. You start to use social media. What does social media say about you? What are your patients saying about you on social media? Do you know? Do you look at Yelp and some of the feedback that Yelp has? You know, Facebook. What are you saying on Facebook? And what are patients saying about you on Facebook? These are all different things that will be used in branding. But you have to know what your reputation is in the community. You may think that you're doing a great job, but you may have one unhappy patient that's out there just spewing everywhere throughout social media and causing a great deal of negativism towards your office. Are you aware of that? Are you aware of what's going on? So these are type of things that you need to look at as you're being involved in physician marketing. So don't think that physician marketing is just walking into an office. Again, what are you doing at health fairs? Are you participating in health fairs? That's branding. Are you speaking at community events? That's branding. You know, one of the things I used to do when I was in private practice, I spoke at like the Lions Club and the Rotary Club, and get involved in those community activities, because those are areas where you'll start to brand yourself and you'll build up a reputation within your community as one who's helping and as one who is very involved in their community. These are all part of physician marketing. The more you get involved in your community, the more that you get involved in the healthcare community, the more that you can build your reputation, is you're enhancing your brand. And that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. Let's go to the next slide. So let's look at the second phase of physician marketing. So if we look at our content and strategy. So we've talked about what you need to do to build up and what you need to do to build yourself. But now what are you going to do when you go into the office? What are you going to do when you talk to the physician? So next slide, if we go to, we're going to talk about strategy. What is your strategy? What is it that you're going to talk about that's going to be relevant to these physicians? And you can see that there's a number of things you can talk about. You don't want to always go in and talk about the same thing. The second thing you want to remember is when you go into an office, you want to have a plan. You want to know before you ever enter that office what your plan is going to be and what you're going to talk about. And each time you go in, you should have something new. And it could be something from a business strategy. It could be your audience. What is it that this was, you'll have a different audience if you're going to a gerontologist than if you're going to an internal medicine specialist. Or if you're going to an ear, nose, and throat specialist who doesn't have an audiologist on their staff. So there's different physicians that you're going to look at. And you're going to look at what's their specialty and what is it that you can talk about to them. Other things you want to look at, though, is what's your websites look like? What do you have on there? You'd be surprised at how many physicians look at websites of their referral sources. And so you want to look at what is on your website. Let's go to the next slide. In short, you want to make sure that you deliver consistent, valuable information to the physicians that you visit. They ultimately will refer to you. Now, when you meet with a physician, how much time do you think you're going to have with them? You'll probably only have 3 to 5 minutes that you'll actually be able to sit and talk to a physician. If you get 5 minutes, consider yourself lucky. And so in that 5 minutes, what are you going to talk about? There's a word that we utilize a great deal, and that is your elevator speech. I spend a great deal of time on Capitol Hill in Washington talking to senators, talking to congressmen and women, and Food and Drug Administration, different offices. And when I go in, I know I only have a few minutes with them. So what's my elevator speech? What is it that I'm going to say in that 3 to 5 minutes that will be of importance, that will grab their attention, and that will help me and help them with their patients? So think about before you go into an office, practice that elevator speech. What is it? What is it that you're going to say? What is it that you're going to leave behind? That's all part of your strategy. And so knowing what you're going to do when you go into an office, knowing exactly what you're going to leave behind, that is practice strategy. And so just don't, and then and another part of your strategy that's not part of content, but where are you going to go? Who are you going to go see? What offices are you going to visit? And so you want to look at that. You want to start to plan out, what's my plan of attack? What's my time frame? And so am I going to take 4 physicians' offices or 4 practices over the next 60 days? Those are going to be my targets. So you want to make sure you're not just shotgunning everything, but you want to make a narrow field. You want to make sure that you have, as you look at these, as you look at your plan, is what plan makes sense. And we're going to talk a little bit more about plan in a few moments. So let's look at phase 3. So if we look at phase 3, we'll see that that is setting goals and meeting needs. Setting goals is a very important part of your physician marketing plan. Let's go to the next slide. SMART goals. If I was sitting in a meeting and I could see everyone, I'd ask you, how many of you have heard of SMART goals? SMART goals is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. What are your goals for physician marketing? What is it, before you even start a physician marketing plan, what is it that you want to accomplish? And you need to be specific. It's not, I want to get more patients. That's not specific. I want to get more patients who need hearing aids, or I want to get more referrals for vestibular testing, or I want to get more patients. What is it specifically? And how many do you want to get? What amount of number do you want to see on your schedule on a weekly basis from physician referrals? Do you want 1 a week? Do you want 5 a week? What is it that you want? Or do you want it to be, I want 35% of my practice to be physician-based? What is it? Be specific and think through it. Secondly, make sure that your goal is measurable. Your goal may be, I'm going to visit on a monthly basis 6 offices. 2 will be new offices and 4 will be return visits to offices. That's measurable. You can measure then how many of those offices did you actually go to. Your measurable goal, if it's how many patients you want to see, did you achieve that amount? It may be a monetary goal. I want that X amount of dollars will come from physician marketing referrals. So make sure you can measure it, because if your goal cannot be measured, then you really don't have a goal. Is it attainable? Meaning, when you start to make a goal, make it so it's a goal that you can reach. If you are very busy and you're in a busy office and you can't be setting a goal of, well, I'm going to visit 10 physicians in the next month. You maybe only have time to get out of your office 1 day a week or 1 day a month. And so if you had set a goal of 10 and you can only get 2, that wasn't attainable. If you say, I'm going to have reimbursements from physicians or referrals that end up with reimbursements of 80% of my practice, that's not attainable. That's really high. And so you want to make sure that your goals are attainable. And when you're first starting out in a private practice, if you're starting out a new private practice, you're going to have more time for physician referral. So make sure that the goals that you set are attainable, that they're relevant, they make sense. You know, you may set a high goal for all these vestibular tests, but you may be in a small community where you're only going to get a few. So is it relevant? Look at what you want to achieve. If you want to have more vestibular results and you're talking to pediatricians, well, then how relevant is that? But if you're talking to gerontologists, then all of a sudden you have more. And so you want to make sure that those goals are relevant. And then lastly, you want to make sure there's time-based. You have a specific amount of time that you're allowing yourself. You don't want to say, in the next year, I will visit 5 offices. That's not time-based. You want to say, in the next month. You want to make it in short increments, in a month or weeks or a quarter at the most. So utilizing SMART goals. So be specific. Make sure that you can measure the outcomes, that they're attainable, they're relevant, and time-based. And this not only works for physician marketing, this works with everything. As you start to build your practices, as you start to work with individuals, these are goals that you can start to incorporate as you work with individuals and patients. Your patients, what are your goals as you start to work with a patient? What are the goals for your employees? Your employees are going to want to have measurable, time-based goals. So as you start to work with employees, what are they? So SMART goals will work for you throughout your career. One of the things that I've always done in my career, and I've been going on a little over 42 years in this industry now, is I've always tried to plan my progression in the industry with SMART goals. I've always tried to think of myself, where do I want to be in 1 year? And where do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want to be doing? And so you start to set your own personal goals using these. So think always of your SMART goals with each physician that you visit and with each office visit you go to. What is that SMART goal that you're trying to achieve? Let's go to the next slide. Filling the void. Now, what does this mean? Well, there's actually 3 dimensions of filling that void. First of all, the first void is the physician. The physician needs a reliable source. So when they refer a patient, they have a void. They do not have your services in their offices. So how can you fill that void? How can you help them with their hearing imbalance patients? What can you do for them? How can you fill their void? Secondly, patients, they have a void. They need a reliable person to work with. Who is it that they can go to? You know, years ago, I can remember going into a physician's office, doing some physician marketing, and I asked them, you know, today, who do you send your patients that have hearing problems or balance issues? And an answer that I heard many times was, well, I give them a list of names. Well, if they have a list of 4 or 5 offices to go to, how do they know who is reliable? How do they know what is best for them? I had several even tell me, I tell them to look in the yellow pages, talk to their friends. That is not what they go to their physician for. You want to be able to fill that void, and you want to be reliable for those patients. Third is you need patients to fill the void in your schedule. And so you need to sustain your business. So physician marketing will help fill your void and keep you busy and keep you working on a regular basis and bringing income into your office, which is so filling the void. So remember, there's 3 parts to that. There's the physician void, there's the patient void, and there's your schedule void. Let's go to the next slide. So we want to engage. We want to engage when we go to meet with these physicians and these different groups. And so you want to connect with them. You want to make sure that you have a connection with them. So as you meet with them, talk to them, establish rapport with them. And so they know who you are. Discuss. You're a professional. You're on their level. And so you want to be able to discuss with them, not how the weather's doing, not what the local sports team may have done, but you want to talk to them about a topic. You want to discuss with them how you can engage with them as a professional. You want to have a plan. You want to have a plan when you go in there of what you can do for them and how they can help you, and establish that plan together and then implement it. And so you may have a plan that you say to them, for your vestibular patients, here's what I can do for you. Or for your hearing aid patients, here's what I can do for you. Or if you have a sudden hearing loss, send me your patient. I will perform these tests. I will get back to you within 24 hours of a reply, and you will have a report. And so you want to make sure that when that happens, that you implement that and put it into action. If you tell a physician's office that you're visiting that you're going to give them something, you're going to provide some information, or they have a topic that they're interested in, provide that information when you get back to your office. Talk to them, see what they need, see where they may need your help, see what questions they may have. One of the things that I learned from the medical school is that most physicians, when it comes to hearing and hearing imbalance issues in audiology, may have 1 to 2 hours of discussion in a course about our profession. They don't know a great deal about us. They don't know all the services that we can have, that we can provide for them. This is your chance to engage with them and to give them more information. So don't be afraid to step up. Don't be afraid to talk to them. Engage with them. Discuss with them. Plan with them. And don't be intimidated by them. Next slide. So there's 3 cores of physician engagement that you want to make sure that you're covering as you work with these individuals. One is you want to be credible. You want to come across as an individual who has credibility. Next, you want to be authentic. And so you want to make sure that they can feel who you are. They can see. And then the third is you want to be visible. You want to be visible in your community, in the healthcare community, in helping people. So these are the 3 sides of this triangle. And if we look at the next slide, we'll see this in a little different aspect. So in this triangle, as we build your credibility, your authenticity, and your visibility, social media. What is your social media campaign look like? Do you want to get involved with social media? That's so important today. People want to see who you are. They want to know what you're doing. They want to know why they can go to your office. What is it about you? More and more people are utilizing social media today than ever. 75% of all individuals over 60 years old are on social media, and especially Facebook, almost daily. And so you need to be aware. What is your social media presence? What is your print media? Are you utilizing advertisements? Are you doing advertorials? That means, does your local newspaper have a section where you can do like a Dear Abby comment, the Dear Dr. So-and-so, and you can have issues on hearing loss and balance problems. You know, do you put out a newsletter to the community and to patients? So what is that visibility? All these things are marketing. And those newsletters can go to your physician. You can drop them off. This is all part of physician marketing. And then your personal connections. How often are you visiting those physicians' offices? How often does a member of your office stop into that office? You know, there's many forms of, it could be just dropping off donuts one day, or it could just be having a staff member. I have an audiologist who I know once a month goes to different offices and drops just a plant off, or visits with their front office staff for a few moments. These are all things that are making personal connections, so that when that physician has a patient with a hearing or balance issue, they think of your office. They think of your office. So there's all different types of ways that you can do physician marketing. And think of these different ways that you can do. Next slide. So authenticity, what's it mean to be authentic? Well, basically be yourself. If the physician sees who you are and what you represent, they want trust and respect. And they want to be able to send patients to a person that they can trust and respect. And so that's what being authentic means. In your campaigns, in your dealing with patients, be yourself. You can deliver. Let them know what you can deliver. And make sure that you deliver on what you say. Also, when you visit and make these physician referral revisits and you talk to them, testimonials are great. Bring testimonials from your patients that you've seen. And if you have patients that are from those physicians that you're visiting, bring their testimonials. That is so great. If a physician can then build that trust and they can understand who you are and that they can feel that authenticity of what you represent to them. And so and again, I can't emphasize enough, be visible in your community. Be visible. Don't be this person they just see once or twice a year, because remember, you want to differentiate yourself from your competitors. And these are ways to do that. Let's go to the next slide. So visibility, how can you become more visible? Remember that triangle we talked about, visibility. So, you know, your brand, your professionalism, the devices that you dispense. If you're in the hearing aid side of the business and you're dispensing hearing aids, what brands do you know, that's going to represent you. What's your manufacturer's relationship that you have, and some of the things that they can do for you. It's imperative that the community knows what your brand is and that you're visible within that community. You know, go to these health fairs, go to different activities within the community, be out in front, sponsor different activities. You may have a local playhouse, and one of the things you could do for a small amount is be a sponsor to that playhouse. Different things like that your patients are going to go to, that the community is going to go to, that the physician is going to go to. The more contact they see your name, they see your business, and they see your logo, is going to be another reinforcement. So don't think again that the only time you're doing physician marketing is when you're sitting in front of a physician or you're in that office. It's the many things that you do within the community. Personally visit the primary care physician's practice. That's a proven approach, becoming more visible. Think about the different types of practices you want to visit. Also, do in-services. Do in-services at nursing homes. Do in-services at different community events. If you have a small hospital that doesn't have an audiology staff, again, do an in-service. Talk to their administrators. Talk to their physicians on those staffs. How can you become more visible in that community? What are things that you can do? You know, another thing that people don't realize, but this is part of physician marketing, you may even do a talk at a local grade school or a junior high or a high school on career days. But these physicians, their children will be in those classrooms. And they will go home and they'll talk to their parents about who visited their classroom that day. And so it's all part of your marketing campaign, all part of marketing. So it's that image that you build, that image that is within your community. Let's go to the next slide. Again, credibility. You know, how credible are you? You know, when was the last time you wrote an article for a local newspaper or some item of interest to leave behind? What type of materials are you going to leave behind as you go into these offices? What is it? You know, what can help them as a clinical practice? What is something that you're doing that maybe somebody else in the community is not doing? You know, again, we talk about this period of time that we're in with the COVID virus. But a great thing is, you know, a part of your physician marketing could be, you know, here is what we did during this episode when this was going on. We did curbside service. We did remote fitting. We have the capability of doing remote fitting through software, through apps, through we did counseling via the internet with our patients. We were in communication with patients even when our offices weren't open because of the stay-at-home rules. So these are different things that you can do and you can leave behind that helps build your credibility. Credibility also relates to the fact that you can evaluate, you can articulate, you can give peer-reviewed information to these physicians. They want peer-reviewed materials. They don't want to hear anecdotal material. And then how you communicate, how you talk to these people. Remember that these are your physicians that you work with, they are data-driven. So the more data that you can provide for them, the more evidence-based results that you can provide to them, that's what they want to see. The more satisfaction surveys that you can show them, that data they want to see. So remember, they look for evidence-based, and that's what you can provide for them. And that will make you more credible in their eyes. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the questions that we talked about physicians, and we've talked to many physicians over the years, is, you know, what is your criteria for adding an audiologist or provider? You know, what do you look for? And the first thing that most of these physicians that we've talked to have said is their competence. How competent are they? We know that there's a lot of people out there. We know that there's a number of audiologists that we can refer our patients to, but we want to make sure our patients go to the most competent. So how competent are you? What can you provide to me? Secondly, their honesty. We hear all kinds of stories, especially in the hearing aid industry, of dishonesty. And so we're not being completely upfront with patients. So are you honest? 3, are you fair? Are you fair with the patients? You may get questioned when you go into offices on what are your fees. Be able to respond that your fees are comparable to the services and needs of the patient. You know, what is it that you do differently? They want to know, and why do you do this? And what's it going to cost my patient? These are things that you want to be able to speak to. Don't be offended by them. Don't take offense to it, because that's what they're looking out for, the welfare of their patients. They want to make sure that the person that they're sending their patients to will treat their patients in a competent manner. They'll be honest and fair with them. And so don't take offense, but be prepared for those type of questions. And those are things that they want to know when they send a patient to you. So how does a physician measure patient outcomes? Satisfaction surveys. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you have data. When you start to look at your patient loads and when you start to work with them, make sure that you're utilizing some type of patient surveys, some type of satisfaction surveys. Physicians want empirical data. That's what they need. They don't want anecdotal evidence. They want to see empirical data. A number of years ago, in my practice, when I was in private practice, there was a large contract that came available from a large hospital. They were looking for a private practice audiology center. And so a number of audiologists within the community responded to their request for information. I was lucky in the fact that our office received the contract. And I was just talking to the administrator, why did we receive the contract over the other offices that submitted bids? And the answer was very simply, you were the only office that submitted empirical data. You gave us over 1,000 patient survey. You showed us that your satisfaction rating based on your patient load was at such a level. And most of the other offices who replied to the request were giving us anecdotal evidence. Well, we can do this, we can do that, but they didn't give us satisfaction empirical data. Keep that. Make sure you measure that. And that is what physicians want to know. What is that documentation that you have? What is that feedback that you're receiving from patients? Don't let them rely only on social media. Next slide. So let's go to the fourth phase and the last phase of physician marketing, which is follow-up. What do physicians want to know? What do they want to know? So this portion, I met with a number of physicians to ask what is it that they want to know? What is it that they want to know? So what is it you would like to see from a referral provider? So you as the audiologist, what is it that they want to see from you that will keep them referring or keep you referring to them? And the first thing they said, we want data. We want to know exactly what it is. We want to know what the pre and post treatment information is. So we want to know, what did they find before they started their treatment, and how did their treatment help that patient? Was it just a diagnostic report, or did they actually do some type of therapeutic report? If you fit a patient with hearing aids, they want to see what was the pre-testing and what was the post-testing. What was some of the improvements that you saw? Did you see a functional improvement? Not just what you did, but how did they improve? Did they have increased ability to hear a noise? What was the results of your speech and noise testing, and how did that improve? What was the discrimination levels like pre-testing and post-testing with hearing aids? Did you do things such as the AFAB or the COSI or some other type of survey that you utilize with your patient? Give them this information. They don't just want to hear that so-and-so, your patient so-and-so was seen on this date, and I provided them with the hearing test that showed they had a mild to moderate sensory neural hearing loss, and we fit them with hearing aids. And you tell them the make and model. Make and model of hearing aids doesn't tell them a great deal. But if you can show them the referral source, the things that you provided for that. Your patient had this amount of trouble in noise, and with hearing aids on, post-fitting, we found this improvement. We found this improvement on the COSI. We found this on this test. They want this empirical data. They want to see what those results are. That's what they want in a report. That's what they want to know. Next slide. They want to know, do you prefer to be consistently updated by audiologists on new research, technology, etc.? When you go to visit them, what is it that they want to know? What do you want the audiologist to continually bring materials to them? And they say yes. They love updates on evidence-based advances in the industry. They're looking at many different areas. When I go to my internist, we talk about a number of things. But he knows I'm an audiologist, and he always starts to talk. He always asks me, one of the first questions he asks me, so what's new in the hearing industry? What's new in the balance industry? And so it gives us a topic to talk about. Your physicians, as you refer, they want to know these things. If you have an article that you've read that you think this would be great for Dr. Jones, who's a gerontologist, this is something on balance issues, make a copy of that, send it to them, or better yet, go to their office or have one of your office members take that article and drop it off to their front office. Say, hey, this is from Dr. So-and-so, and this is for your doctor. She or he was thinking about this. That would be very applicable. Put a little note on it, a sticky note from you directly to that physician. This is all part of being marketing, of branding yourself. This is what these physicians want to know. They want to be consistently updated. They want to have information. And so if you can provide that information to them, that's great. Let's go to the next slide. Before your relationship with an audiologist, what are your thoughts on hearing loss? You'll see that these patients, that these individuals, they don't know a great deal about hearing. And they also want to know how far away you are. This sounds crazy, but most patients do not want to drive more than 10 miles from home. So when you start to establish your physician market radius, keep it within that 10-mile radius at first and work that way. Lastly, we want to talk about best practices. Make sure that when you're working with patients and for your referrals, those referrals you use best practices. Do not cut corners. The more that you practice utilizing best practices, your patients will tell their physician, what a great job you've done. They'll tell their friends. They'll go back and they'll say, I went to this office and I've never had testing done like this before. I've never had this thorough of an exam before. These are things that will build your brand and your reputation. Next slide. So summary, remember there's the next slide, 4 phases of marketing. So there's create your brand. Second phase is marketing. Third phase, meeting the needs of the physician. And fourth is follow-up. So I think we've taken about an hour. Kate, is there any questions that anyone has?
Kate, I think you may be muted. This is Andrew. I appreciate it, Dr. Tedeschi. We'll take a few minutes for some questions. Let's see, the first question is, if I want to prepare a small folder for the physician, how much is too much?
Great question. How much is too much? What I would do in my initial folder that I take to an office, what you want to place in there is a little bit of your biography, some information about your office, location, possibly some referral cards in there, and a list of the services that you can provide. So something that will help differentiate, and an article, especially if you can have an article that was written about your office or about some topic that highlights you. And that's it. You don't need much more than that, just a few items. But mainly that first folder that you want to take in is going to highlight you in your office. And you don't want to have a great deal, because most physicians will only take about 1 to 3 minutes in their office to look over what you dropped off. So you want to make it quick. You want to make it something that's easy, but you want it to be something that will stand out for them, that will make a mental note in their minds.
Great, thank you. And just a reminder, if you have a question, make sure that you enter that question into the question queue and we'll get to you momentarily. Next question is, how often should I send a report to the physician? Like sending the first diagnostic and treatment report, or just when a referral is brought, or consistently after that?
I would send a report every time you see that patient. So if it's a diagnostic patient and it's just for an evaluation, then as soon as you're finished with that patient, send it to them. But if you're seeing a patient ongoing and you may have seen them 2 or 3 or 4 times, I would send a report every time you visit with them, just to keep that physician updated on what's happening. The more contact you have with that physician and in treating their patient, the more they're going to remember you and the more that they're going to refer to you. The last thing that they want to ever find out is that you had a patient that went to you and they never knew it. And so even if a patient comes from you from a referral from a friend or a referral from some outside marketing campaign that you may do, ask that patient if you can have permission to send to their physician or their managing physician a letter, just to let them know, because that way you make a great impression upon that physician and they know who you are, that you're treating one of their patients.
Great. Next question is, how often / realistic is having a lunch and learn with a local physician?
Lunch and learns are, they are good. How often you should do it is maybe, I would, if you're looking at the same physician, maybe once, twice a year. Lunch and learns maybe once a month, and picking different physicians are great. Make sure though that you have a purpose for that lunch and learn. So when you go, make sure it's just not lunch and no learn. Make sure that it's lunch and learn. So you bring a topic, you bring a handout, and sometimes the physician may only stop in for just a couple minutes, but you can educate the staff that's coming into that lunch and learn. And so you're going to find out some of your greatest advocates are the staff members, and they will help remind that physician, the physician's assistant. Those are people that can become your greatest allies. So once or twice a year is enough. Doing it more than that, I think that you're going to lose the edge that you would bring with it.
Great. Next question is one phase of physician marketing more critical than the others?
Probably the most critical is just your branding. That is probably the most critical phase of that, and setting your goals. Those 2 phases are probably the most important. Set your goals, make them realistic, make them smart, and then implement them. And so that is, and then branding yourself. The more that you can brand yourself, the more that you can differentiate yourself, that becomes so important, because what you want to do is when that physician, no matter what their specialty is, when they see a patient that has a hearing problem or a balance problem, you want them to think of your name first. And that's what's critical.
Great. And it looks like we have one final question, and I think this was in reference to your discussion about the Lions Club and the Rotary Club. Are there any other community activities you can recommend involvement in?
There's always health fairs that are going on, and so look at your community, what health fairs are taking place. There are church functions that go on. There are different types of auxiliary groups. There's, you also have city clubs. So there's a number of different community resources, but resources to get involved yourself in. Some communities have Sertoma clubs, which specialize in hearing loss. You have the Lions Club, you have the Rotary Club, those types of clubs that meet on a monthly basis. And so those are all great community activities to become involved in.
Great, and it looks like there aren't any more questions, and it looks like we are out of time for today's session. If you have any additional questions, please send them to info@audiologist.org, and we will forward the questions to the presenter. If you have friends and colleagues that were unable to attend the webinar today, please let them know that the session has been recorded. We will send a link out to attendees after the recording is posted. For more information about future SATA practice management webinars and to register, please visit www.audiologist.org/students. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.